All right, guys, it's now time to talk about the duds and the injuries from Week 3 to preview Week 4 for this week. These are the guys that kind of let us down last week, guys that didn't come through for us, and wondering what their status is going forward. So again, kind of going game by game, real rapid fire, just to get us through within time. I kind of pushed on time on that last video. YouTube is so restrictive. Got to have 15 minutes in their videos too, so whatever. Cam Newton to Carolina let a lot of fantasy owners down in that Thursday night game. Too much pressure, too much nothing. 16 of 30, 242 yards with 3 interceptions. You know, wasn't expected against that Giants defense that got shredded by Josh Freeman in Tampa Bay the previous week. His demeanor is also a big question mark going forward. He got ripped into by Steve Smith about his demeanor. That's definitely a concern as well. Another tough matchup this week with Atlanta. Just shut down Phillip Rivers in San Diego. You know, obviously you expect Newton to bounce back because he has such big play capability, but I only see him as a number 2 quarterback at best for this matchup with the Falcons this week. Victor Cruz had a big letdown week too. Only 6 catches for 42 yards. Apparently it really hurt him that Hakeem Nicks was out this week. He fell kind of the syndrome where the secondary just swarms the number 1 guy, and that's unfortunately what happened with Cruz. Ramses Barden, though, that gave him the opportunity to shine, who was a guy I mentioned in the Studs video. I'm not sold on Ramses Barden yet because Hakeem Nicks is probably coming back this week, but guy you definitely want to watch. But don't panic on Victor Cruz. I think he's still a must-start guy. He's still going to get a share of targets. Now that Nicks is back, I think it's only going to help Cruz more. Definitely go ahead. You're fine starting Victor Cruz going forward. Brandon LaFell. I thought the trend would continue. He had 2 great weeks the first 2 weeks of the season. He was targeted by Cam Newton, but didn't take advantage of any of those opportunities. Only had 1 catch for 27 yards this week, and then he drops a stud. And he falls behind Steve Smith. He's now clearly far behind Greg Olsen. He drops down to the number 3 guy, I think. And until he becomes more consistent, I don't know if he can really give up on the guy yet. I did because I found better options out there, like guys like Hawkins, Jerome Simpson, who comes back this week. So I gave up on LaFell. But if you're still going to use him, I think is nothing more than number 3, number 4 play at this point going forward. Justin Blackmon. Boy, Jacksonville. What do we make? I mean, this guy, they drafted this guy to be their next big-time receiver, but he has done nothing. I don't know if that's just because Blaine Gabbert is his quarterback or what's going on there, but he has just been a complete and utter disappointment when we draft this guy to probably be a number 2, number 3 fantasy receiver, and only 1 catch for 7 yards this week, just a big-time disappointment. He's getting outplayed by Cecil Shorts, a guy that was drafted after him. You can safely cut Justin Blackmon loose at this point. And I think that whole offseason arrest at the start of the season just hurt him from the start. Trent Richardson of Cleveland kind of had a big disappointment kind of week. 12 carries for 27 yards. The touchdown saved his fantasy day, but apparently Buffalo's run D is a lot stronger than I thought it was. And it's not going to get easier this week. You're playing Baltimore on a really short week. Last week for New England, Ridley and Woodhead didn't do much against that Baltimore D. The pass carved them up, but for the most part didn't do a whole lot. So but if you don't have better options, I think you can certainly start Richardson. More of a number 2 option for that matchup this week. If you don't have any better options at running back, he's still going to get the lion's share of the work, obviously. Greg Little. I had him on the list last week as guys you could watch. He had a big performance. I wasn't sold on him, and this is the reason why. He is Mr. Dropsy, okay? He just, I don't know what he uses on his hands. If he eats popcorn before the game, get your popcorn ready, butter, I don't know. Apparently he doesn't have stick him on his gloves because he just keeps dropping the ball. They are now thinking of considering benching him because of these ball drop issues. If you had any faith in Greg Little, cut him. Done. He just does not come through for you. Brian Hartline in Miami, we had him on the studs list last week after his breakout performance, but he kind of fell back to earth again this week. 1 catch for 41 yards. Granted, Not a complete stinker. That's 4 fantasy points in a CBS league. But it does show how far behind Hartline is on the depth chart in Miami. Granted, there's not a whole lot of talent at receiver in Miami. But, it's just there's not a whole lot of weapons there. So, so I think for the matchup with the Arizona D next week, nothing more than a number 3 guy. Pierre Thomas in New Orleans, well, so much for him being the main rusher. Him, Sproles, and Ingram all got equal carries on the ground. Thomas only had 6 carries for 11 yards. Sproles is still the main threat there in New Orleans until otherwise noted. Thomas is nothing more than number 3, and like I've said on here, Ingram shouldn't be even owned at this point. Again, Chris Johnson. Dude's built his own home on the stud list. He's hit the nails with the hammer. He's built the home on the dud list, and he's living in it, okay? He has just been the biggest hair puller, head scratcher, whatever you want to call it, of this year. We rely on this guy. He was CJ2K just a few years ago. Now he's CJ no K. I mean, he just Zippo. He doesn't do hardly anything for us. 14 carries, but only 24 yards. You just can't rely on him. And honestly, it would not surprise me if the guy lost his job to Javon Ringer again. It honestly would not surprise me if that happened. You might not be able to cut him if he's an undroppable player, but I've read in NFL.com leagues that he is droppable now in NFL.com leagues. So you can drop him there. If he's still not droppable, though, put him on your bench. Don't rely on the guy right now. He's worthless at this point. Frank Gore, though, is one you don't really want to panic on too much. 12 carries for 63 yards, lost a fumble, but he still gets the bulk of the work in San Francisco. They were playing, where were they playing last week? They were playing Minnesota. That's, you'd hope he did a little more against them, but didn't do a whole lot. I think he's still worth starting next week. The Jets D, even though the Jets D tends to be tough, they just got gashed by the Dolphins run game last week, so I think Frank Gore is still a strong start going forward. Steven Jackson, well, the sigh of relief is apparently he's healthy. That groin issue was not as big as what we thought it was. And Daryl Richardson didn't steal his thunder, but 11 carries for 29 yards this week. But you knew he wouldn't do much. It was the Bears' defense, so you knew that he would struggle there. Time will tell, however, though, if Jackson's running out of juice or not. We'll certainly see. And he's going up against that Seahawks D this week that looked real impressive against the Packers on Monday Night Football. I think I see Jackson more than a number 2, number 3 guy for the matchup this week against Seattle, and you might even consider benching him if you have better options out there, a strong guy you got off of waivers. Maybe you consider that this week. Doug Martin in Tampa Bay, wouldn't panic too much on him either. He still getting the bulk of the work, 19 carries for 53 yards. You wish he'd find the end zone in those goal line chances. He's had 4 goal line opportunities to score. He has not converted on them yet. But once he does, and I think it's only going to get better, once he does, he'll be a solid runner the rest of the way. But the Dallas D did a good job in shutting him down. You got to give him credit for that. He should bounce back really nicely this week. He's playing Washington. The Skins D has been really suspect all year. I think you start Doug Martin with confidence this week. Speaking of Tampa Bay guys, again, Vincent Jackson. I gave him the apology of the week last week. And once again, he turns into the hair puller, okay? He just, again, let you down. 1 catch for 29 yards? Are you kidding me, V-Jack? I mean, I don't even know. Should I even give apologies anymore to players? Am I gonna curse the guy I gave it to in my stud video? Because, who was that guy? I know I gave it to somebody. I mean, it seems like I'm like the Madden curse, Oh, Fitzgerald. You think Larry's gonna have a bad week this week because these things I do to the apology of the week, guys? I'm worse than Madden. I'm worse than the Madden curse. But because the Skins D has been so suspect, I'll still give some confidence in V-Jack. A number 3 with upside for the matchup. And I don't buy Mike Williams still, by the way, so don't even ignore his stats. Ryan Matthews in San Diego. That wasn't expected. I thought he was going to be ready to go right out of the box, but unfortunately didn't come through. 10 carries, 44 yards with a fumble. He was outgained by Jackie Battle. That's certainly a problem. But I think he bounces back. I think he's a decent number 2 against Kansas City next week. All right, real quick, last few guys. Speaking of the Chargers, wide receivers, Floyd, Meacham, Gates, they were all big-time disappointments for this week, but playing the Chiefs next week should help us. I think Floyd and Gates are still solid starts for you, but Meacham has disappeared. I think he's not even worth a look. Michael Vick, just awful this week against that tough Cards defense. But, now you got to face the Giants pass rush next week. Can you really afford to bench him? I don't know. I think he's more of a number 2 for that matchup. Deshaun Jackson, see Michael Vick. As he goes, Deshaun Jackson goes. 3 catches for 43 yards. I see him as a number 2 for that Giants matchup. The Giants secondary isn't stellar. They got beat by Josh Freeman for gosh sake, or burned by him, but that's how I see it. Steelers running backs, you can't trust any of them until Mendenhall comes back, I think. I mistakenly said that Mendenhall was coming back last week. That's my bad. I thought the reports were read that he was coming back. He didn't. But I don't think you can afford to start Redmond or Jonathan Dwyer until Mendenhall comes back. Obviously, Pittsburgh's on a bye this week. It might give more time for Mendenhall to come back next week. So don't buy into those guys right now. Same with Broncos running backs. That's a head-scratching situation right now. Obviously, McGahee is the one you want to own, but in Moreno's absence, Ball and Hillman are also going to be in the mix. Plus, McGahee has the rib issue. We don't know how that's going to play out, so I would just avoid it entirely. Same in Denver, Demaryius Thomas, Jacob Tamme, they let us down this week. I still like Thomas as a solid number 2, number 3. Tamme is more of a desperate number 2, number 3 because he's getting outplayed by Joel Dreesen. So, obviously, the receiver to own in Denver is Eric Decker. Stevan Ridley, like I said, I mentioned Ridley of New England, who was shut down by Baltimore last week. Got only 13 carries for 37 yards. I think he's going to bounce back next week though against a pretty light Buffalo D. I think he'll be okay. I think you can start him, but Wood has nothing more than a handcuff number 3. Although Buffalo, we saw last week, kind of bogged down Richardson a bit, but I still think Ridley's going to do okay. Aaron Rodgers, I mentioned his name. He's been a big-time bust the last 2 weeks, only averaging 10.5 points the last 2 weeks. But he has battled 2 tough defenses in Chicago and Seattle. They play the Saints this week. It's a tough call. It is an easier matchup, but, you obviously don't want to bench him unless you have a guy kind of behind you that's been playing well lately. So keep that in mind. But maybe roll with it this week, see what happens. And Packers wideout, same way. As they go, Rodgers goes. I don't trust James Jones. I don't trust Randall Cobb anymore after his dismal performance. I think Finley and Nelson and Jennings are all going to be okay. I think they're still good starts going forward. Finally, real quick on the injury front, I mentioned it here and there. Spiller's going to miss 1 to 2 weeks with that sprained shoulder. But the question returns is, what's his role going to be? What's the Buffalo backfield going to look like? Reggie Bush, his status is unknown for this week with that knee injury, but I wouldn't start any Miami running back against the Cardinals. Dexter McCluster lost a fumble, awkwardly landed on that arm. You can probably expect him to miss some time with that, but he was worth nothing more than number 3, number 4 anyway. And Darius Hayward-Bay is going to be out for Oakland and for an indefinite amount of time. Took that nasty shot to his head and chin. Did suffer a concussion and some neck issues, but he's definitely going to be out for a while. The stock goes up for guys like Denarius Moore, and even Brandon Myers, a sneaky name, as a result. Okay, guys, that's it for this week. Good luck this week in your Week 4 matchups. I got my first win last week, as I mentioned in the Monday Night Mayhem video. Hopefully you guys can keep it going this week as well. So keep on winning, keep on going, and we'll see you again next week for the Week 5 preview. Hopefully no more crazy injuries, no more crazy stuff. Hopefully we get the real refs back soon. There's talk right now that they're close to a deal. Hopefully they'll be back. Just too much craziness in the world of fantasy right now. So we just want some normalcy, and hopefully will lead us to victory. Good luck. Thanks, guys.